We're on the record. I'm Sheila Cass. Good morning. Nearly 550 people die each year in car crashes in Maryland. Motorists, pedestrians, cyclists. The 5-year average of lives lost is 550. And each year more than 45,000 people are injured in collisions, plus countless near misses. How is the state tracking this data? And what can be done to make roads safer for everyone? Chrissy Nizer is administrator of the Maryland Department of Transportation Motor Vehicle Administration and has been since 2015. Welcome to On the Record.
Thanks for having me.
Maryland launched a crash data dashboard this past spring. It shows information about fatal crashes in the state, including where and when incidents happened. How is this data collected and used?
That's right. So law enforcement obviously collects the data at the time that the crash occurs. They complete the crash report, and that is centrally maintained. We've been working with our partners at the State Highway Administration as well as Maryland State Police to make that data more accessible to our partners who are working on these issues, as well as to the general public. You know, when we think about our goal of 0 fatalities on the roadway, it really is a goal that can only be reached with everybody working together, and information is really critical to that. So we're really excited we were able to publicly launch that earlier this year to provide everyone more information about what's causing crashes.
And it is the crash dashboard, not the accident dashboard. Why?
I'm so glad you brought that up. So for us, it is so critical that an accident, is something that happens, it as a result of, lack of attempting to do something. It happens by accident, no pun intended. But when you think about a crash, it really is something that was caused by the individual, by action they took or failed to take. So you got a drink, you went and got behind the wheel. You're speeding too fast for conditions on the roadway. You failed to buckle your seatbelt. These are all things that are deliberate actions by the individual. These aren't accidents. These aren't a trip and fall. And so it diminishes, frankly, the pain and suffering that the families and the victims go through after one of these serious or even minor crashes, frankly. And so for us, it's out of respect to those victims that we make sure that we call them crashes. And it's also about reminding each and every one of us that we have a responsibility. Each time we get behind the wheel, we can do everything in our power to ensure a crash doesn't occur.
Presenting this data is part of the state's Vision Zero plan, and it's at a website called Zero Deaths Maryland. What is the strategy to achieve this goal of zero deaths?
Well, first, it really starts with the goal, and we all agree that, we talked a little bit about numbers, but they're really more than just numbers. They're family members, they're friends, coworkers, members of the community. And so what we do is we look at the data to try to determine what actions we need to take to really drive down that data. We look at what are the causes of fatalities in particular. And one of the things we're really focused on is in Maryland is the fact that pedestrian fatalities is really a large group of fatalities, about 20 to 25% each year. And so we really want to stay focused on our vulnerable roadway users and make sure that they're safe as well.
Let's talk about what the crash data reveals. Is there a time of year when there are more collisions?
Certainly, there are specific months that are challenging from a fatality standpoint. I mean, we focus on impaired driving around the holidays. That tends to be a time that we're together with friends and family, but it's also a time where folks may be drinking and then making the dangerous decision to get behind the wheel. We also look at holiday weekends for that same reason, right? You'll see a lot of messaging around July 4th and Memorial Day and Labor Day. Again, because we want people to enjoy the holiday. We want people to be responsible, though, and make a plan before they consume anything so that they know they have a safe and sober ride home.
Well, what are the most common causes of crashes?
The most common causes really are people going too fast, being impaired behind the wheel, being distracted, as well as not wearing your seatbelt. If you think about it, just buckling up takes a few seconds, but we still have a large percentage of our crashes where we see someone failed to buckle up. It really is the best thing you can do to protect yourself during a crash. Cannot emphasize enough, buckle up every time you get in the car, whether you're the driver, whether you're the passenger, whether you're in the front seat or the back seat. It is the most impactful thing that you can do to save your life and reduce injuries in a vehicle.
And what is the percentage of accidents of injuries that involve someone not buckling up?
So the good news is, I mean, our seatbelt use rate is over 90%, so that's great, but we're still seeing a large percentage of crashes that involve somebody that is not buckled up. And so, that's where really it's just unfortunately the people that are doing that risky behavior, because oftentimes what we see is they're speeding and they're distracted and they're not wearing the seatbelt. So it's, combination of factors. And so we know in terms of the number of drivers who could have potentially survived, about 60 people each year could have survived the crash if they were simply buckled up.
This is On the Record. I'm Sheila Cass speaking with Chrissy Nizer, who heads Maryland's Motor Vehicle Administration, about preventing motor vehicle crashes and deaths. Where do most crashes occur?
So, I mean, certainly people think about our highways because the rate of speed is higher, but really also crashes occur, when you're in close proximity to your home and the place that you work. So a crash can occur anywhere. Interestingly, when we look at the data for 2022, the longest stretch of days without a fatality was actually 5 days. So we couldn't even go a full week without somebody dying needlessly on our roadways. Our focus is every day, to ensure that everybody gets home safely.
Are there some counties that rank way above others in the number of crashes?
So certainly when you look at where the population is in Maryland, the crashes are reflected there. And that makes sense, right? The more populated counties, you do tend to see more crashes. So you've got more individuals out on the roadway because of the number of drivers who live in those counties, more density. And so it certainly makes sense. But it is important to remember that, crashes happen all over the state, not just in those high density areas.
TRIP, a national transportation research nonprofit, found that traffic fatalities rose across the country in 2020 and have been slow to drop back to pre-pandemic levels. That's true in Maryland, too. Why do you think that's so?
I think it is that driver behavior changed as a result of the pandemic, and it really hasn't gone back to the way it was before. If you look at our data prior to 2020, the number of crashes and fatalities were decreasing, and they reached our recent low of 512 fatalities in 2018. Now, certainly, we still weren't happy with that number, but it was moving in the right direction. And then we saw the pandemic hit. Definitely saw speed increase as a result of pandemic. Folks weren't out on the roadway as much, and so those drivers who were out there were driving at a excessive rate of speed. After the pandemic, you see the number of vehicles on the road increasing, but people are still driving way too fast. And now you have more vehicles on the road, which really makes dangerous conditions. We also saw changes to our impaired driving. We see more impaired driving during the day, and that really started during the pandemic. Maybe people changing their, the hours of work and the nature of teleworking and how that impacted our society. But a lot more of that where traditionally impaired driving was more of a late night, early morning when you saw that to the greatest extent.
So it sounds like you're saying an attitude shift is needed, that drivers are not taking safety seriously enough.
That is our message, that really to reach zero fatalities, it takes each and every one of us thinking about it, being more conscious of it. We get behind the wheel. Are we thinking about what we're going to have for dinner that night? Or are we really focused on driving and making sure we get home safely? We have a campaign called Be the Driver, and the whole focus of that is that each and every one of us has a personal responsibility that comes with driving. And not only when you're in the driver, anytime you're in a vehicle. So even if you're the passenger and you see something unsafe happening, You might feel a little uncomfortable bringing it up, but the reality is, wouldn't you rather say something in advance and stop that action from happening than suffer the consequences either yourself or somebody else? And so we're asking each and every Maryland resident to take that personal responsibility to be the sober driver, be the focused driver, be the slow down driver, be the buckled up driver, be the share the road driver, and the look twice driver.
Do we have a system, should we have a system that takes into account that some people won't be as responsible as the setup requires them to be? Is there something we can do about people who know they should wear their seatbelts but don't, who know they shouldn't drink and drive but do?
So there's all kinds of technology improvements that have been made over the years to make our vehicles safer, which frankly have helped save lives on our roadway. The invention of the seatbelt, anti-lock brakes, airbags, so many things that are just standard features now in terms of the vehicle. At the Department of Transportation, we're looking at connected and automated vehicles. How does that have the possibility to eventually save lives on our roadway as an extension of the technology that exists today? Some of the things on your car, lane assist, automatic braking, these are all additional security features, safety features that are being added to vehicles today to try to prevent that crash from happening, even if the individual isn't aware. But at the end of the day, as long as the individual is still driving the vehicle, that responsibility is still there. And that's why we try to emphasize it, because driving is one of those things that, most Americans do so frequently, they just don't think about in the way of, I need to spend my full time and attention on driving. It's not something I can do while I'm thinking about something else. And so that's why the emphasis for us is on that. But technology does play a great role in helping to assist the driver and make them aware of things that maybe they weren't conscious of.
Last month, the Moore administration awarded about $1 million in state highway safety grants. Some of the recipients are community groups that work with children, or bicycling associations. What benefit do you see these local projects having?
It is so important in highway safety that we work collaboratively with our partners. Not only do we have a statewide strategic highway safety plan, we are supporting our local partners in developing their own local strategic highway safety plan to focus their efforts in the community level, really on the issues that are causing us to lose people on our roadways. And so in particular, our vulnerable roadway users, whether that's our pedestrians, whether it's our bicyclists, we want to make sure they're safe on the roadway, because certainly it's dangerous for anybody to be in a crash when you're in a vehicle. But if you're on a bike or you're walking down the roadway, obviously you're at a clear disadvantage when it comes to interaction with a vehicle. And so we're asking everybody to look out for each other. We have a disproportionate number of pedestrian fatalities in particular every year. And so it's a real area of focus for us to try to make sure we drive those numbers down.
Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
Chrissy Nizer is administrator of the Maryland Department of Transportation Motor Vehicle Administration. At the On the Record page, WYPR.org, we have links to the crash data dashboard and more information about the state's zero death strategy.